Today I'd like to take you with me as I play with materials and see what happens. So if I'm entirely honest with you, I've got no idea what I'm going to be doing today. I am feeling a little bit under-inspired. So I thought what I'd do is look back through some old sketchbooks, maybe have a flick through some art books that I've got on my shelf, seeing if anything is calling to me, interests me, and also then maybe have a bit of a rummage through my art materials. And hopefully those three things, looking at my sketchbooks, looking at some art books, and just looking at my art materials, will give me at least a tiny little starting point. I found this book on Picasso and paper on my bookshelf, and it's a book about his love and use of paper and collage and cutouts, and it just prompted an idea. And often I do that. I'm just looking through art books to just kind of give me a spark of inspiration, and this definitely gave me a spark of inspiration today. So he's drawn or painted, and then he's torn or cut out these distinct pieces, and some of them are just really beautiful, and I just love the idea of the shapes being the whole page. So that idea of mixing materials and then cutting out the shape, I think, is what I'm going to do today. So that has prompted a small idea, and it reminded me of something I did a few weeks ago actually, and I'd completely sort of forgotten about. This piece here, which is just a folded piece of paper. So I've taken one A3 piece of paper, folded it in half and worked on all the sides, and then I've actually cut out this shape here. So it just reminded me of that kind of cutout process. This piece of paper I made with, or this piece I made with a water-based felt tip pen, and I'm adding lines and details and water and sort of playing about. So I think I've also added in a little bit of white pen. This here looks like a white pen, and this bit here. So this was an experimental piece that I just found looking back through my kind of pile of sketchbooks and things, and often that really just prompts a starting point. And then again, this is a sketchbook from earlier in this year, and I was really loving creating these big bold shapes with these vase shapes with kind of organic forms. So those three things together, my sketchbook, this little piece here with the cutout, looking at this Picasso book, has given me an idea of what I'm going to do today. So I'm going to grab some paper, I'm going to grab some materials, and I'm going to, I think, make some cutouts of this kind of thing that I have developed in my sketchbook. Here we are at the end of my play date with materials, and I've had a lovely day. So when I started today, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I wanted to play and explore and have a day where I'm not worried about the outcome. I've been working on a big project for the last few months, which has taken a lot of my time. So I just wanted a day of fun and exploration and using materials and seeing where I got to. So I have done just that. I have used a whole pile of materials, mostly water-based materials. So I've used water-based felt tip pen and added water. I've used a Caran d'Ache Neocolour watercolour crayon and added water. I've used just a normal bog standard pencil. I've used a Inktense pencil from Derwent. So an Inktense draws like a pencil and then you add water and it turns into sort of inky, so that's quite fun. And I've also used a water-based pen. So, and add some white ink. So I used all sorts of materials, and really I do love sometimes just getting out a pile of materials and seeing what happens. But for me personally, I tend to find that I do better if I've got a little bit of a direction of travel. So I looked at that Picasso book, I looked back through my sketchbook, I was looking for a kind of bounding box to help me play with materials. And this is the pile that I have created, and I'm hoping you can see that okay. So I did some bigger pieces. I just started on big pieces of watercolour paper, which is probably about 350 grams per square metre, so quite nice and thick paper, because I knew I was going to be cutting it out. So I started with these little ones. Let me clear the decks a bit. So I started with these. I started on a big piece of paper, just did some scribbles, some lines, added some water, mixed together different materials, and then cut out these shapes. Now I started to draw the shapes and then I really went freehand, freestyle. And, you know, these aren't finished things, are they, necessarily? But I really love the shapes in between. And I think you can, that's why I've put it on black paper to show you. I really love the way that these shapes interact with each other and the negative space. And I find that really interesting. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these next. I might arrange them on this black piece of paper and take some photographs and just look at some different compositions and some different ways of putting these things together to see if there's anything pleasing. So that's what I did. I did some scribbles, cut them out and added to them. So this is a dark piece of watercolour. There we go. So that's where I started. Then I started to work on some larger pieces. And I've cut some of them out, but I think I'm going to leave these as is. And here I can see that there's some really interesting ways to mix the materials, which I might revisit. I'm really enjoying the watercolour paint on top of the white ink and how it's sort of created these splodgy marks. I like the pen underneath some white ink. So there's some things here that I just really have discovered about the ways in which I like to personally mix materials. And that is a win in my book. So, you know, I haven't created brilliant outcomes necessarily. These aren't pieces that I'm going to put on the wall. But what I have discovered are some really interesting mixes of materials. I've had a good fun playing, and sometimes that's what we've got to do in art making. I sometimes think it's a little bit like being an archaeologist, where you have to kind of scrabble around in the dirt and see if you can find any precious treasure, if you can find anything new and interesting. And sometimes you find, you know, a piece of gold and sometimes you don't. But I've really enjoyed the process today of just getting my materials out and seeing what I can do when I mix them together with a little bit of a bounding box. So I had a small direction of travel. I had something to respond to, which I find helps me be a little bit more productive.